husband handed me the divorce papers in the middle of the ICU. "Sign it. I want a perfect wife, not a burden in a wheelchair." I signed it on the spot. He flashed a cold smile. "Pay your own hospital bills." I just said, "Okay." And he had no idea that my name on that paper was the beginning of his end. The room was too white, the light harsh, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant. The sheets were pulled so tight, it was as if the hospital wanted to hide any sign of weakness. The monitor beside me kept an irritating rhythm. Beep, 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 the most expensive and coldest sound in existence. My right leg was immobilized. The doctor swore I would walk again, with time and physical therapy. Time was all I had. What I didn't have was patience for humiliation. I heard rushed footsteps down the hall before the door swung open. The steps of someone who isn't coming out of love, but to finish a job. He came in first, not really looking at me, a cheap manila envelope in his hand. Behind him, my mother-in-law appeared, looking completely lost. She clutched her purse tightly and avoided my eyes. Her mouth trembled, but she said nothing. My husband dragged a chair over with a screech, dropping the envelope on the bedside table. The pen was attached with a string, as if even the pen were a captive. He opened the envelope slowly. The petition was already prepared. Name, social security number, date, all in perfect lines. His signature at the bottom was crooked, nervous. I recognized the haste in it. Sign it. It wasn't a request. It was an order. He leaned close to my face as if I were deaf. "I want a perfect wife, not a burden in a wheelchair." A burden. The word didn't wound me, it just confirmed something. And when something is confirmed, it becomes a decision. My mother-in-law cleared her throat softly. Her eyes said this was wrong, but her body said she wouldn't stop it. I had learned early on that in her family, silence was a form of worship. "And the expenses?" I asked, my voice steady. He let out a short, joyless laugh. "Pay your own hospital bills." I stared at him for a second, not to ask for an explanation, but to record the scene exactly as it was, because I knew deep down I would need to remember it with absolute clarity. He crossed his arms, waiting for my desperation. I didn't give it to him. I looked at the paper like any other contract. He thought I was weak. He thought I would beg. He thought my mind was gone. But I remembered something very simple. In America, a piece of paper is worth more than a promise, and a signature is worth more than a speech. I remembered the notary public's office near the Capitol building in Austin. 3 years ago, I was there to get my signature notarized for a major contract for my company. The notary asked for my ID, stamped the document, and kept a copy of my signature. I left there with a certainty. A signature is an identity. That day, my husband laughed in the car. "You take these things too seriously." I took them seriously, and that's why I built everything he now wanted to rip away from me. In the ICU, I held the pen with a hand marked by IV needles. My mother-in-law held her breath. My husband stood motionless, waiting for the scene of a broken woman. I signed immediately, without a tremor, without tears, without asking for more time. I wrote my full legal name, exactly as it appeared on my official documents and on the company's contracts, the kind a notary recognizes without a second thought. When I finished, I handed the pen back and looked my husband in the eye. "It's done," I said. He blinked, surprised I hadn't made a scene. Then his smile appeared, a smile of an easy victory. "Great." He took the paper as if lifting a weight from his shoulders. "It's better for both of us this way." I didn't answer. My mother-in-law finally managed a short, breathless sentence. "You'll get better." I could have said many things. I just looked at her and let the silence respond. My husband stood up, adjusted his shirt, and walked to the door. When he opened it, I saw the rush again. The rush of someone running toward another life, another woman, another cheap dream. He left. My mother-in-law followed right behind him with shorter steps, like someone carrying a guilt she doesn't know where to put down. When the door closed, the room seemed larger. The beep of the monitor became sharper. A lump formed in my throat for a moment, not from love, but from memory. I remembered who I had been in that house. I was the woman who paid the down payment on our condo when his business failed. I was the woman who held his hand at his father's funeral. I was the woman who bought his mother's prescriptions when her insurance lapsed. I was the woman who endured his jokes at barbecues to keep the peace, and still, I became a burden. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The voice of my neighbor, Carol, popped into my head. Carol was nearly 60 and spoke with a mix of affection and truth. "Honey, if a man wants to leave, you let him go, but you don't let him take your dignity with him." I pushed the call button. A nurse came in, young and tired, with dark circles under her eyes that no concealer could hide. "Everything okay, ma'am?" "Everything's fine," I replied. My voice sounded too calm. "I need to speak with hospital administration now, and I need my cell phone." She hesitated, but she brought it to me. When the device landed in my hand, I felt its weight, like holding a key. I opened my contacts and looked for a name I hadn't called in months. Jessica, my lawyer. I hit call. When she answered, I didn't break down. I simply said, "Jessica, he brought me the divorce papers in the ICU, and I signed them, the right way." There was a brief silence on the other end, and then her voice came, low and firm. "Then he just gifted you the very thing he wanted to hide most." I looked at the closed door and pictured my husband walking away from here as if he had won, and I smiled, a small, cold smile. "I want him to understand," I said slowly, "that my name on that paper isn't the end of the marriage, it's the beginning of the reckoning." I hung up. In a hospital, everything is recorded. Time, name, witnesses, paper, signature, and in that envelope, besides my name, was his full legal name, the name he uses to open accounts, sign contracts, seem respectable, the name that was now going to be used to prove who he really is. I wasn't shattered. I was waking up, and he had no idea what I already held in my hand. The name on the paper was the first piece. He thought the pain would only live in my leg, but it had changed direction. It was in my throat, in that space between "I loved you" and "you despised me." The next morning, I woke up to the same beeping monitor and a strange weight on my chest. It wasn't shortness of breath, it was shame. Shame for remembering every time I made myself smaller to fit into that marriage. The nurse came in early, opened the blinds a little, and the Austin light flooded the room as if the world outside hadn't been run over by my life. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, fiddling with the IV drip. "I'm fine," I replied. It was a lie, but it was a lie that was holding me together. She made a note, adjusted the bed, and left. I stared at the ceiling for a while, trying to understand how someone could abandon a person in the most vulnerable place possible. The ICU isn't just a section of the hospital, it's a stage, a place where any sentence becomes a verdict. And my husband chose to speak like an executioner. I could still taste the bitterness of that word, burden. The most humiliating part was that he had said it with the casualness of someone saying, "Pass the salt," as if I were truly just a logistical problem, a broken thing. I turned my head and looked at my immobilized leg. The skin was pale. The orthopedic boot seemed enormous. I remembered the night of the accident in flashes. A blinding headlight, a brake that didn't respond, the sharp sound of impact, then a void filled with voices. And now here I was, with a trapped leg and a marriage that had been buried before I even woke up. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. "Unknown number," I answered. "Mrs. Sophia Miller?" The voice was professional, dry. "I'm calling from the administration department. We need to discuss your health insurance." I gripped the phone. "Go on." "It appears there is a discrepancy in your coverage. The policyholder modified the details 2 weeks ago. Some procedures now require additional authorization." I felt my stomach drop. Policyholder. The policy was in his name. I had left it that way for convenience, for trust, because it was easier when he handled those things. When you trust someone, you hand them little keys without realizing it, until the day they lock you out. "Who modified it?" I asked, though I already knew. There was an update through the app with a password and confirmation. It was requested by Mr. Ethan Miller. Ethan, my husband. I didn't respond right away, just took a deep breath so my voice wouldn't shake. "And what does that mean now?" I asked. "It means that until this is regularized, some costs will be the responsibility of the patient." The call ended with the woman saying she would send me an email. I thanked her as if it were a simple bureaucratic issue. I hung up and sat in silence for a minute, staring at nothing. He didn't just want to leave, he wanted me to pay for the privilege of being alive. I closed my eyes and a memory came like a soft stab. Our first year of marriage. He would come home and hug me from behind while I made coffee. "You're my peace," he'd say. I believed him. The second year, when his company started to fail, I didn't complain. I covered expenses, made spreadsheets, cut back on luxuries, stopped traveling. I sold a car to keep his business afloat. I heard him crying in the shower, thinking I didn't know, and I stayed because I thought that's what marriage was, supporting each other. Now, in the ICU, I was discovering that for him, marriage was convenience, not partnership. When the convenience ran out, I became disposable. My chest tightened, not with nostalgia, but with indignation. I didn't want to go back in time. I just wanted to have seen it sooner. The door to the room opened and I saw Carol walk in with a grocery bag and a look of someone who has lived long enough not to be scared by tragedy. She approached slowly, quietly, left the bag on the chair, and came over to me. "Morning, honey." "Good morning," I replied, and felt my voice crack. Carol took my hand gently, like someone holding something important. "I heard," she said, without asking what. "That man did what he did." I didn't cry. Not because I was too strong, but because I was dry inside, a dryness that only comes when something dies. Carol opened the bag. Inside was a bottle of coconut water, a new mug, crackers, and a thermos of homemade broth. "I brought you some real food." Home food. The hospital leaves a metallic taste in your mouth. I almost laughed. Almost. It was a minimal smile. "Thank you." She sat down and looked at me the right way. Not like a nurse, not like a curious visitor here for the gossip. She looked at me like a mother. "Sophia, look at me." She squeezed my hand. "You did nothing wrong." "I signed it," I said softly. "I signed it anyway, Carol." She didn't even blink. "You signed it because he cornered you and because you're smart. You weren't going to give him a scene he could use against you, were you?" I swallowed hard. "He tampered with the insurance," I said. "I just found out." Carol grimaced in disgust. "Coward. That's what weak men do." She took a deep breath and lowered her voice, almost as if telling a secret. "I saw him, you know," she said. "My whole body went on alert. While you were in here, he came back to the building 2 nights in a row. And he wasn't alone. I didn't ask who with. I could already imagine. A young woman," Carol continued, "pretty, perfect nails, expensive purse." She walked in laughing out loud like she owned the place. The image burned in my mind. It wasn't jealousy, it was the insult. Because I was still in the hospital. I was still trapped in a bed, and he was introducing someone else into my life, as if I no longer existed. "He told the doorman she was a friend," Carol said, "but he was holding her by the waist. I'm not stupid." I closed my eyes for a second. That's when the pain appeared, because no matter how rational I was a wife, I was a woman, I had plans, I imagined a future, and that future had been occupied by a stranger as if I were a piece of old furniture. "Sophia," Carol said, cupping my face gently, "crying doesn't make you weaker. But you can't cry in front of him. No." Now I opened my eyes. "I'm not going to cry," I said, and I realized it was true. I was past the point of crying. I was at the point of decision. My phone buzzed again, a text from my husband. Just 3 words, "We need to talk." I laughed. A silent laugh. He had kicked me out of his life in the ICU, and now he wanted to talk. I didn't reply. I opened my banking app and saw that a transfer had been scheduled from my company's main account. A small amount, divided, almost discreet, the kind of amount no one notices in the middle of chaos. But I noticed it. I swiped the screen and saw 2 more, and then another. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. My heart grew unnaturally calm. The same man who called me a burden was using my company like his personal ATM. I called Jessica again. She answered quickly. "I knew you'd call back." "He tampered with the health insurance," I said, "and there are scheduled transfers from the business account." Jessica took a deep breath. "He's trying to drain what he thinks is his." "But it isn't," I said. "No," she confirmed. It isn't. I closed my eyes and pictured him, probably in a rented apartment, toasting with someone, believing he had won. I said slowly, I want you to explain something simple to me, Jessica. No legal jargon, like you were explaining it to Carol. Jessica let out a short chuckle. Okay. Here's the deal. He thought he caught you when you were weak, but you signed the right way, with your full legal name, while of sound mind. That takes away his narrative that you were incapacitated. Furthermore, the fact that he made you sign at that moment helps prove his intent, his haste, his cruelty. And the name? I asked. His full legal name on the paper is the anchor. He's the real person. ID, signature, date. He can't claim later it wasn't him. It's like having it notarized. Right name, right person, right responsibility. I managed a small, cold smile. Then I'm going to make him feel it, I said. Feel what? Jessica asked. That I am not a burden. I hung up and looked at Carol. She understood just from my expression. What are you going to do, honey? I answered in the simplest way. I'm going to stop being the good one. Carol nodded, as if it were the blessing I needed. Then you do it right. I took a deep breath and called the physical therapist. When she came in, I asked for the support bar and tried to stand up. The pain shot up like fire. My hands trembled. I almost fell, and I heard my own voice, low, firm, coming out from the middle of that effort. I am going to walk again. The therapist supported me gently. One step at a time. I took one step, and in that step, I felt that it wasn't just my body coming back, it was my life. Outside the hospital, my husband thought I was trapped, but I had already started to walk out, and when I got out, I was going to shut the door in his face, without screaming, without begging, just with facts. And he hadn't even understood that the envelope he threw on my bed wasn't the end. It was the receipt for his mistake. I always thought revenge was about screaming, breaking plates, public humiliation, a scandal in the middle of the street. But Jessica taught me something I'll never forget. In America, the most expensive revenge is the silent kind, because it comes with a stamp, a file number, a date and time, and no one can erase it. By the end of that afternoon, I had made two decisions. First, I would never argue with him over text again. Second, I was going to leave this hospital with something he never had any control over. The physical therapist came back after lunch. She adjusted the support belt around my waist and placed the crutch on the correct side. Today we're going to stand for longer, she said. I took a deep breath. The floor seemed so far away, like trying to get down from a building without stairs. When I stood up, the pain surged like a hot electric shock. My vision blurred for a second. I felt cold sweat on my back. Easy, she said firmly. You can do this. I placed my hands on the bar and held my breath. In that moment, I thought of my husband laughing. Pay your own hospital bills. I thought of him calling my injured body a burden, and something inside me went quiet. Not sad quiet, but silent, like a switch being flipped, turning off the fragile part. I took another step, and when I sat down again, I didn't feel victory. I felt a direction. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my bank manager. I didn't remember writing to him until I recalled I had activated something months ago, a power of attorney I signed at the notary's office to handle business account matters when I was traveling. It wasn't anything legally complex. It was just the kind of paperwork a business owner prepares so their life doesn't come to a halt. I had forgotten about it. My husband had too. Sophia, I see some scheduled movements here. Do you want me to put a hold on them? I closed my eyes slowly. There it was. The first effect of the name on the paper. Because when you sign the right way, when you prove you are lucid, you become the owner of your story again, and people take you seriously. I replied, hold everything. Today. Then I called Philip, my accountant, a man in his late 40s, calm, who always spoke in a low voice as if he were in a meeting with God. Philip, I said, I need you to look at all the scheduled transfers right now. He didn't even ask why. He just said, I'm opening the file now. While he analyzed it, I opened the email from the health insurance company and looked at the history. Change of contact, change of authorization, change of billing address. All done in 2 weeks while I was working, while I thought my marriage was normal. Carol was beside me with a cup of coffee and a look on her face that said she wanted to hit someone with the mug itself. "He did it because he thought you'd stay quiet," she said. "He did it because he thought I was going to die," I corrected, without emotion. Carol looked at me, her mouth slightly open. "And because he thought I'd be too ashamed to fight back," I continued in a low voice. "Jessica called me at that exact moment," I answered. "Sophia, I've already requested a precautionary freeze on the business account. The bank will call you to confirm." "They already have," I replied. "Perfect," her voice grew firmer. "Now you need something simple. Proof of intent. You already have the paper from the ICU, the insurance history, and the transfers." I looked out the window. "And how do I get him to incriminate himself?" I asked. Jessica didn't hesitate. "Make him talk," I smiled coldly. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I asked, "What if I meet him for coffee?" "Good idea," Jessica agreed. "A public but discreet place. No shouting. He'll feel in control, and he'll run his mouth." "And what do I do?" I asked. "You just listen," Jessica breathed. "You have the face of someone who listens and remembers." I hung up and looked at Carol. "I'm going to meet with him." Carol almost jumped out of her chair. "You're not going alone." "I won't," I said, "but he doesn't need to know that." That night, I sent my husband a single text, one that seemed innocent. "Okay, tomorrow at 5 p.m. at the Central Cafe." He replied in less than a minute. Perfect. He had always loved that word, as if life were a pretty filter and a decorative wife by his side. The next day, I was in a regular room, still in pain, still struggling, but with a dangerous clarity, and I got ready. Not like a patient, but like a woman who doesn't apologize for existing. Hair pulled back, light makeup, and a subtle lipstick. A blouse made of good fabric, because I knew that men like him get scared when the woman they've discarded shows up looking solid. The physical therapist helped me into the wheelchair. "Are you sure you want to go out?" she asked. "I'm sure," I replied. "Today, I need to walk on the inside." Carol accompanied me to the entrance. She didn't go into the cafe. She stayed outside, near the car, like a protective shadow. The Central Cafe was old and elegant at the same time. Small tables, antique tiles, people talking in low voices, a place where no one makes a scene because everyone there pretends to have class. My husband was already there. Well-ironed shirt, expensive watch, strong cologne. He stood up when he saw me and feigned concern. "You should be resting," he said, as if he still had authority over me. I smiled calmly. "I am." He looked at the wheelchair with that expression that had disgusted me from the start. It wasn't pity, it was revulsion. He sat down and ordered an espresso. I ordered water. He laughed lightly. "Always so controlled, aren't you? Even with your coffee." I looked at him as if observing a child. "Say what you want to say," I said, cutting to the chase. He was surprised I had cut through the theater. So he got straight to the point, because men like him always do. "I want to resolve this quickly. No drama. You signed, so we each go our own way." "Of course," I replied. He relaxed a little, and when he relaxes, he talks too much. "No need to get lawyers involved," he said. "We just divide what can be divided and that's it." I kept my voice steady. "What can be divided?" I asked. He smiled, a smile of someone who thinks they're being generous. The company, for instance. I felt the air in my chest turn to ice, but my expression didn't change. "The company," I repeated. "Yes." He fiddled with his phone as if it were obvious. "I helped. I was by your side." I tilted my head slightly. "You were by my side when it was convenient for you," I said. He narrowed his eyes. "Sophia, don't do this." His voice grew harder. "You know I deserve a share." There it was. His truth had always been that. It wasn't love. It was a percentage. I rested my fingers on the glass of water. "Yes, you do deserve it," I said softly. "You deserve exactly what you built." He smiled again, thinking I had given in. "Great then. See how rational we can be?" He leaned in. "Look, I know I was harsh in the ICU, but understand me. I'm young. I need to live. You're not going to be the same person you were before." I listened to that as if it were rain, and inside I thanked him, because every sentence he spoke was another brick in my foundation. I looked him in the face and asked, as if out of curiosity, "Did you tamper with the health insurance?" He blinked. For a millisecond, his control cracked. "What insurance?" I smiled. "Mine, the one for the hospital." The coverage was changed. The authorization was changed. The contact was changed. It was an interesting coincidence. He managed a short, fake smile. "Oh, that must be a system error." I didn't argue. I just asked one more thing in the same calm manner. "And the transfers from the business account?" This time, he got serious. "What about them?" "The scheduled transfers?" I paused. "To an account I don't recognize." He opened his mouth and closed it. And then he did what all guilty people do. He attacked. "Are you accusing me of stealing?" I took a deep breath. "I'm asking you," I said. "You're the one who answered like a guilty man." His face hardened. "You're being paranoid." I nodded as if I agreed. "Maybe I am." I looked at his still hot coffee. Or maybe it's just math. He started to rise from his chair, irritated, but held himself back because of the setting. "Sophia, do you really think you have the strength to fight me right now, in your condition?" "My condition." He didn't even need to say in a wheelchair again. He pointed to it with his eyes. I remained silent for a second, and then I did the one thing he didn't expect. I laughed softly, not with happiness, but with contempt. I looked at him and said the simplest sentence in the world. "You don't get it, do you, Ethan?" He frowned. "Get what?" I leaned my face close enough for him to hear me without anyone else listening. I signed in the ICU, the right way. I smiled coldly. "And you left me your full legal name on that paper." He turned pale, and in that instant I saw the fear, because he realized I wasn't there to apologize. I was there taking notes. He swallowed hard. "Sophia," he began. I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Now it's my turn." I gestured to the waiter, paid for my water, and asked for help to leave. As I passed by him, I said without looking at him, "You wanted a perfect wife? Then learn to deal with a clear-headed woman." I left the cafe with a strange feeling of lightness. Outside, Carol was waiting for me with a steady gaze. "Well?" she asked. I replied with a calm that felt terrifying, even to me. He said everything I needed him to say. And at that very moment, my bank manager sent me a text. "All movements frozen, pending your instructions." I looked at the screen and felt the first real taste of justice. It wasn't sweet, it was clean. And it was just the beginning. I didn't celebrate. I didn't send him provocative messages. I didn't go home to feel victorious as if this were a game. Because when you're over 30 and you've already carried a family on your back, you don't confuse justice with euphoria. I just breathed and moved forward. In the car, Carol calmly fastened her seatbelt and looked at me before starting the engine. "Are you okay?" "I'm awake," I replied. She nodded as if she understood exactly what that meant. We returned to the hospital in silence, and along the way, my phone started vibrating nonstop. "Ethan, Ethan, again, Ethan." Insistent, as if my life were still a door he could knock on until someone opened it. I didn't answer. I opened the banking app one last time, just to confirm. Everything frozen, not a single cent moving, no invisible maneuvers. Something simple and, for him, cruel. Control. When I got to my room, Jessica had already sent me a voice message. "Sophia," he took the bait. "Now we're going to do what makes a coward stop playing games. We bring it into the light. No scandals, just facts. And you need a moral witness in this story." I knew what she meant. My mother-in-law. Helen wasn't just his mother. She was the symbol. She lived for appearances, for reputation, for saying nice things in front of others, for going to church on Sunday and spewing silent venom during the week. And yet, I knew she had a weak spot, the pride of having raised a good man. The irony was that this pride was now going to become a knife. I video called Jessica right then. She appeared with her hair tied back, wearing glasses, and that look of someone who has seen a lot of rich people cry in a courtroom. "I don't want to destroy him," I said. Jessica's expression didn't change. "I know. You want justice. Destruction is what he did in the ICU." I clutched the sheet with my hand. I want him to feel it, I said, but I don't want to become the kind of person he expects. Then you're going to do what hurts him most. You're going to play fair, she replied, and you're going to let him get dirty all by himself. I breathed in slowly. How do we make Helen see the reality? I asked. Jessica was direct. You don't convince her with emotions, you convince her with shame. That evening, I asked the nurse to help me shower. It was a slow, painful shower, but a necessary one. I needed to feel my skin as my own again. Afterwards, I put on a simple but elegant outfit. No luxuries, just presence. Carol brushed my hair with a gentleness that hurt more than my leg. You look like your mother, she said quietly. I didn't reply. I didn't want to open a door to tears. Jessica arrived at the hospital to pick me up, and together we went to Helen's house. She lived in an old, established neighborhood with tree-lined streets, a doorman who addresses everyone by their last name, and neighbors who watch the lives of others through their rearview mirrors. The kind of place where people don't have peace. They have a storefront window. I entered the living room with the help of the wheelchair. Helen was standing there in a light-knit cardigan, her hair perfectly coiffed, and that face of someone who has already decided to hate me before I open my mouth. Sophia, she said, forcing a polite tone, you should be in the hospital. I have permission to be out for a few hours, I replied calmly. Ethan wasn't there. I had made sure of that. I hadn't come to fight with him. I had come to put his mother face to face with the son she had raised. Helen sat down in her armchair and crossed her legs. The living room smelled of lavender and control. He told me you've settled everything, she began. I looked directly at her. He told you his version of it, I said. Now I'm going to tell you the version from the paperwork. The word paperwork made her face harden. She hated when reality became a document. I took a thin folder from my bag. Nothing dramatic, just a folder, and placed it on the coffee table. I won't waste your time, I said. I just need you to know 3 things. Helen lifted her chin. 3 things. First, I said, he handed me the divorce petition in the ICU. She opened her mouth, but I continued before she could interrupt me. In the ICU, at a moment when I couldn't even get out of bed. He looked at me and said, I want a perfect wife, not a burden in a wheelchair. The silence in the room grew heavy. Helen blinked slowly. He wouldn't say that, she tried automatically, as if denial were a habit. Jessica intervened with a firm but non-aggressive voice. Helen, the hospital logs all visitors, and there are witnesses. Besides, the petition was signed at that exact time. Do you understand the moral weight of that? Moral? Helen repeated, irritated. This is a private matter between a couple. I smiled very slightly. It was, I said, until he turned it into a public humiliation. Helen gripped the handle of her purse. I continued. Second, he tampered with my health insurance. Her eyes narrowed. That's a lie. I opened the printed-out email and slid it across to her. Modification made by the policyholder. 2 weeks before the accident. Changed the contact, changed the authorization, changed the coverage. Helen read it quickly. Her hand trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. And there, I saw something new. Doubt. His mother had spent years defending her son as if it were a religion. Now, for the first time, she had a document that contradicted her faith. I took a breath. Third, I said, he tried to move money from my company while I was in the hospital. Helen looked up. Ethan wouldn't do that. I looked at her steadily. I wanted to believe that phrase too, I said. I really did. But he did. Jessica placed the other sheet on the table. Scheduled transfers, an unknown account, multiple small amounts. Helen froze. She had no pretty arguments for numbers. Numbers are not afraid of reputation. I saw her swallow hard. He must have done it to protect himself, she said, trying to justify it. Protect himself from what? I asked, and left the question hanging in the air, because the answer was obvious. Protect himself from being poor without me. Helen stood up nervously and went to the window. She stared out at the garden as if the garden could absolve her son. What do you want, Sophia? She asked without looking at me. I said in a quiet but clear voice, I want you to stop seeing this as normal. She turned her face, and for the first time, I saw an old pain in her, a pride that was cracking. I raised my son alone, she said, in a tone that mixed anger and confession. His father disappeared. I worked. I did everything. I raised him to be somebody. I wasn't cruel. I didn't rub it in. I just answered with the truth. I know. I paused. And that's why I came here. Because I don't believe you raised a man to abandon a woman in the ICU and then try to take her money. Helen closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, they were moist, but too proud to let a tear fall. He's in love, she said, as if that were an excuse. I tilted my head. So he falls in love and becomes a criminal? Jessica cleared her throat lightly. Helen, we didn't come here to threaten you. We came to give you a chance to resolve this with dignity before it goes to court, to the press, before it becomes a problem for the company, for your reputation. The word reputation made Helen swallow again, because that's what she feared, not injustice, but the judgment of others. I realized that was the key. Then I said the sentence she needed to hear. I don't want anyone to find out, I said. I just want him to own what he did and to stop. Helen turned back to me. What if I talk to him? She asked. Talk to him, I said. But talk to him today. The next morning, Helen organized a family dinner. A family dinner is always a test of character. A big table, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, people commenting on each other's lives with a smile. And I went. I arrived in the wheelchair, but with my back straight. Carol stayed nearby, like someone holding up the world without being noticed. Ethan was there. When he saw me, he froze for half a second and then feigned nonchalance. Sophia, he said, as if I were an unwelcome guest. Helen tapped the table with her hand. Today, we are going to talk like adults. Ethan laughed, trying to dismiss the gravity. Oh, Mom, what's all this for? She already signed. I looked at him. Calm, lucid. I signed. I confirmed. And you thought that was the end? He rolled his eyes, irritated. Sophia, don't come here and make a scene. I didn't even raise my voice. You were the one who made a scene. In the ICU, I said. The table fell silent. An uncle coughed uncomfortably. A cousin looked at her phone. The food lost its flavor. Ethan flashed a crooked smile. I just told the truth, he said. I didn't want a life tied down. I have that right. And there, in front of everyone, he did the most stupid thing of all. He confessed with pride. Helen turned pale. You said that to your wife? She asked in a low, dangerously quiet voice. Ethan shrugged. So what? I'm a man. I have needs. I felt like laughing, not at the sentence, but at the certainty that he was digging his own grave with a spoon of arrogance. Jessica opened the folder and placed a sheet of paper next to his plate. And you also have responsibilities, she said coldly. These transfers were made from her company, and you're the one who modified the health insurance. Ethan glanced at it and tried to react, as he always did, by attacking. This is harassment. She's gone crazy. I just stared at him. I was crazy when I was supporting you and thought it was love, I said. Now, I'm just awake. He gripped his fork tightly. You're going to ruin my life, he growled. I smiled, a small, straight smile. You already ruined it yourself, I replied. Helen shot up from her chair, almost knocking over her glass. Enough! Her voice came out with a weight that no one there ignored. You have brought shame on this family. Ethan was speechless for a second. Mom, he started. Don't, she pointed at him. You will not touch another cent of her money. You will sign what is fair, and you will pay what you owe. He looked around, searching for allies. He found none. Because for the older generation, there's something worse than being poor, having no honor. And in that moment, he had none. I didn't need to shout. I just saw in his face how he finally understood that I had taken from him the one thing he thought he would never lose, his own mother's approval. I pushed my chair back slowly and said before I left, You wanted a perfect wife. I paused. Then learn what a real woman does when she's thrown away. I left, and the noise of the house faded behind me, but the shame stayed with him. After that meal, I didn't feel pleasure. I felt silence, a different silence from the one in the ICU. In the ICU, the silence was humiliation. It was me swallowing my life like bitter medicine. That day, the silence was control. It was the world finally understanding that I was no longer an object in anyone else's story. I returned to the hospital, and for the first time since the accident, I slept without dreaming of his voice. 2 days later, the physical therapist came in with that practical air of someone who doesn't get emotional about drama. Today, we're going down the hall. I looked at my hands, still bruised, still fragile, but my voice was whole. Let's go. She put the harness on me, adjusted the crutch, showed me how to shift my weight. I stood up slowly. The pain came, as always, but now it had a place. It was no longer the pain of abandonment. It was the pain of rebuilding. I took one step, then another, small, clumsy, real. And at the end of the hall, I saw Carol sitting in a chair as if she were an anchor. She smiled when she saw me. "There she is," she said softly, as if not to frighten away the victory. My girl. I couldn't hold it back. Not from sadness, but from relief. A single tear escaped. Carol got up and came to me. "You are not alone," she said. And I understood that family isn't just blood. Family is who stays. The following week, I left the hospital. The sun hit my face as if I had been locked away for years. I got into the car carefully, my legs still in a brace, but my soul was already standing. As soon as I got home, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I locked the door and felt safe. Jessica arrived late that afternoon with a thin folder and the expression of someone bringing good news without needing to smile. "He's agreed to sign." I looked up slowly. "Did he agree because he wanted to?" I asked. Jessica let out a short breath through her nose. "He agreed because he understood that if he didn't sign, the next step would be ugly for him. Ugly. The perfect word. Because men like Ethan aren't afraid of their conscience, they're afraid of their image." "And what are the terms?" I asked. Jessica opened the document and pointed to the lines. "The company remains 100% yours. He is officially removed from any position, any access, any signing authority. He is forbidden from presenting himself as a representative, and he is returning everything he tried to move." I felt a weight lift from my chest, but I didn't celebrate. I just felt. "And the hospital bills?" I asked. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "He's paying his share. Not out of generosity, but out of obligation. And because he knows that the story from the ICU, if it goes to trial, won't look good for him." I closed my eyes for a second. I heard his voice again. "Pay your own hospital bills." And I saw the irony. In the end, he would pay, but not because he decided to be a man, but because the world, with its stamps and dates, doesn't let cowards play games forever. "There's more," Jessica said. I opened my eyes. The bank recorded everything. The attempted transfers, the accounts, the pattern. It creates a trail. He won't be able to do this to someone else so easily. I understood what that meant. I wasn't just saving myself. I was preventing him from running the same scam on the next woman. And that, to me, was worth more than any public humiliation. That night, I sat on my sofa with ice on my leg and a cup of tea I could barely hold. The house was silent, but not empty. I had stopped being a wife and had gone back to being me. The phone vibrated. It was a familiar number. Helen. I took a moment to answer. Not out of fear, but out of caution, because some wounds, if you touch them too soon, reopen. I answered. "Sophia," she said, without her usual arrogance. Her voice was low. "May I speak?" "You may." There was a silence on the other end, and I realized that for the first time she was choosing her words. She wasn't playing a game. "I was ashamed," she confessed, "of what he did, of the way he spoke about you." I didn't respond. I let her continue. "I've spent my life defending my son," she said, "and I thought that was a mother's love. But I confused love with blindness." I breathed slowly. "Helen," I said calmly, "I didn't come to destroy your son. I came to make him stop." "I know," she replied. "And I thank you for doing it without screaming. Because if you had screamed, I would have hated you, and I would have kept defending him." I closed my eyes. That was painfully human. The truth is, some people can only see when the truth is delivered politely, because politeness leaves shame with no escape. I don't know how to apologize very well, Helen continued, but forgive me. I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't affection. It was the feeling of closing a circle. I accept, I said, but don't come back. I'm not asking to come back, she replied, and I heard a small, suppressed sob. I just wanted you to know that I see it. I see what he has become, and I see who you are. I hung up, my hand shaking a little. Carol, who was in the kitchen doing dishes as if the house were her own, looked at me. Was that her? Yes. And then I smiled. She apologized. Carol nodded, like someone who understands that for an older woman, that's almost like surgery without anesthesia. Good, she said. Now, you move forward. And I did. In the following weeks, I lived the kind of routine no one posts on Instagram. Physical therapy, pain, difficult showers, stairs that seemed like mountains, medication, work meetings via video call. And in the midst of it all, small victories. The day I stood on my own for 5 seconds. The day I crossed the living room without a crutch. The day I drove again, slowly, scared, but free. And with every step, I realized something. I wasn't just getting my leg back. I was getting back the respect I had for myself. Ethan tried to call a few times. I never answered. He sent me a text. Sophia, I made a mistake. I was desperate. Desperate. I laughed when I read it. Desperate is someone who doesn't have money for medicine. Desperate is someone holding a loved one's hand in the ICU, afraid of losing them. He wasn't desperate. He was annoyed that he had lost his advantage, and I was no longer available to comfort a man with no character. The day the divorce was officially finalized, I went to the notary's office with Jessica. I carried a light cane, more for security than necessity. I made the effort to walk in. The notary asked for my ID, looked at my signature, stamped the document, and I felt something inside me click into place. It was simple, but it was final. When we walked out, Jessica said, "You won, without getting your hands dirty." I looked up at the clear sky. "I didn't win," I replied. "I came back." That night, I did something small. I opened the living room window. I sat on the sofa, put on some quiet music, and slowly drank a hot coffee. My phone buzzed one last time with his name. I looked at the illuminated screen. "Can I see you just one more time?" I didn't reply. I just swiped the notification away like wiping away a shadow. And I thought, with a calm that felt like both ice and peace at the same time, you wanted a perfect wife. You just didn't understand that the perfect woman isn't the one who puts up with everything. She's the one who knows when to leave and close the door. Alone, I set the cup on the table and let the house breathe with me. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And when freedom arrives, it doesn't make a sound. It simply stays. If this story has moved you in any way, I want to ask you something. Don't ignore the signs that love tries to hide. Sometimes we call something a rough patch when it's already a pattern of disrespect. And if you have been through something similar, leave a comment telling me what city you're listening from. I read, I respond, and I carry you with me. And for those who follow me from other countries, I want to hear from you too. Write the name of your city down below, because pain has different accents, but courage is the same everywhere. Thank you for staying until the end. If you like stories that are strong, real, and about justice, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we don't romanticize suffering, we transform it into strength.